Now, before I get started, I do want to clarify that I am not looking for any pity with any of these videos on any of my own stories, nor am I seeking pity for any of the other stories that may come out in the future. Now, I am not endorsing drug use in this video. I am not endorsing anybody to make dumb choices. This is just to make others aware of the dangers and that anyone can be a victim of both mental and physical abuse as well as the struggle of addiction. There's nothing more, nothing less to this. I just want to get my story out because I'm tired of keeping it pinned in, and the only person I can talk to is kind of myself and very few others that are close to me and never being heard. So let's get this story started. Now, this story takes place over a span of years. It is going to be really hard for me to talk about this because I've never really told anyone about this story, but I kind of want to get it off my chest. But I'm going to start at the end, go back to the beginning, and then explain everything in between so it's kind of as clear as glass for anybody listening. Now, I used to work at a theater, and I would be high all the time working there, and randomly around times that things would be kind of hectic, or even at times that where things were completely calm, I would just have these really bad anxiety attacks that would just kick in. And the realization for me to slow down with the drug use didn't occur until one day in the middle of work, I almost blacked out, and I lied to my managers about what was going on. And for those that are listening that I know were there when it happened, I do apologize for lying to you on it, but I didn't want to get fired. But yeah, I had a lot of problems at the time, and I was constantly using hard drugs to help me get through my daily routine. But when it got to that point to where I almost blacked out, I didn't really think anything of it. It just kind of started happening. The anxiety kicked in. I dropped down, wrapped into a ball pretty much against the wall, and then my vision started to fade. So I ran out to the lobby, and my vision almost hit entirely black until I ran and stuck my head up under a sink. If I wouldn't have threw my head up under a sink and put cold water on my body, I probably would have blacked out and slammed my face on a marble floor, would have gotten fired and wound up in the hospital for a possible concussion. So that kind of saved me, and it was the realization that I needed to slow down and get to stopping. So yeah, that was kind of the start of my drug-induced anxiety attacks. Now, the start of my addiction was when I was about 13 or 14 years old. My neighbor, he pretty much introduced me to it, and I'm not going to say what this drug was, but it would get you really, really high. So high you could barely walk. But I used to use it while I was babysitting, and I'm talking my brothers and sisters, and I felt bad because I was the oldest kid in the house, and I couldn't even pay attention to them. I couldn't do anything really except lay there and just be messed up. Like, it gave me double vision. I couldn't do anything. I was highly disoriented because of this. Let's take it forward a couple of years from there, because this is kind of just how it started. For a while, I stopped using it, and then later on, it got to the point where I was high on it for a whole year. This same drug, I could go buy this down at the store and go home, get high easily for like $1, $2, and yeah, about a year later, I realized me and my friend, one of my other friends, were just using it all the time, which after that realization leads up into the next part of the story. Now, after the realization that I had been using this for a whole year, I was at my buddy's house, and out of nowhere, my body temperature started to rise, and I asked his brother to get me some water. I was like, my body's getting hot, and he's like, what? I'm like, my body's getting hot, please get me water now. And it got so bad, Like, I don't even know how this happened, and I wouldn't wish this upon my worst enemy, but it felt like the tips of my fingers and toes started to catch on fire. It moved through my fingers and my toes, through my feet and hands, through my arms and legs, etc., until it hit the center of my body where my heart is, and it felt like a ball of fire in my chest, and then all of a sudden it shot to my brain, and I blacked out, and the last thing I thought of was my family, my girlfriend at the time, just everybody I cared about. And I came to shortly afterwards, ran outside shirtless, and it was like 15 degrees outside, mind you. I ran outside and vomited in their front yard. It messed me up really bad. So afterwards, I called my mom. I asked her to come pick me up from my friend's house. And another friend of mine was having a birthday party, so she decided to take me over there and drop me off, because I didn't tell her what happened. I just asked her to come pick me up because I wasn't feeling well, and I was just going to go hang out with this other friend. I went over there, and we just hung out for a little while, and one of his friends, I'll never forget this is actually one of the good times of this story, but one of his buddies, he was like, oh, let's do this drug. And I kind of just looked over at him, and because this dude kind of had a big nose, I was like, well, you got the nose for it. And he just looked over and was like, bruh, that's messed up. And I had to apologize. I was like, I'm sorry, man, I'm really messed up. I just had a really bad thing happen to me. And the rest of the day kind of went on fine. After that party, I went home and went to sleep, and I was feeling a lot better after that. But yeah, that's kind of what happened. It was bad. So let's move on to the next part of this story. So me and a buddy of mine, we were hanging out one time. This is like my best friend, so I trust him with my life. So yeah, this was kind of stupid on my part, but I used to do this all the time with one of my buddies, the one that introduced me to the drugs when I was like 14. I was like 17, 18 years old now, and we were going to show this guy what it was like to get knocked out, because I'm sure at this point everybody knows what the knockout game is, where you make your buddy pass out or whatever, because it's like a cheap way to get high, this, that, and the other. I'm pretty sure everybody knows about that. But I trusted my friend with my life, and he went to do this to me, and when I let him do it, I started to freak out. Like, I went feral the minute I lost consciousness. And even he freaked out. He let go of me because I started clawing at his arm, and I didn't even know that this was happening. I had no idea. And he was like, dude, you were fighting for your life. I had to let you go. You tore my arm up. And I looked over at his arm, and there were a bunch of like scratch marks because I was unconsciously fighting for my life, or I was subconsciously fighting for my life. And that's when I realized I had PTSD from that event that happened on New Year's. And mind you, this was a while after that. This is when I had quit using that drug, and I had gotten clean. It was a scary experience for me, and I don't wish that upon anybody. So this is kind of why I'm telling my story on this. I want people to be aware that one bad trip can ruin the fun times you have with your friends. So don't be stupid like I was. Now the next part of this story, you're probably gonna be like, oh my god, such a dumbass. Why'd you go back? Why'd you go back to the drugs? Come on now, why? You're just dumb. But yeah, after what happened in the previous story, maybe like 5 years down the line, I was like 22, 23 years old, and I decided to go live with my stepmom to try to get to know who my father was, more or less. I mean, he really wasn't there either way it went, but I'll talk about that story at another time. But I was living with my stepmom, and for a time I did get into something kind of harder. Nothing super serious or anything, but it kind of stemmed from there. And then I wanted to move back to where my best friend was, the one I said I trusted with my life. And I got him to come pick me up. And when he did, he came back with the other friend I was with when the New Year's blackout occurred, when we were getting high all the time. And they introduced me to a stronger drug. And I kind of got guilt-tripped into doing it, but at the same time, it was my own decision. I contemplated it for like a week when they kept offering it to me, and then eventually I said, you know what, okay, whatever, I did get you guys into something you were never doing, so I'll try it just this once with you guys. And it wasn't just that once, it continued and continued and continued for a couple of years, actually. And when it got to that point, there was a point where they were spending a lot of money, and I'm talking like $80 to $150 every day on this stuff. And as it got worse, I stopped hanging out with them because of that happening. And I didn't stop with it myself. I can't say that I did. I did still do the same drug, but I did it more moderately / a lot less than what it was. I didn't really do it as hard as everybody else I knew was doing it. So later on down the line, I got somebody else into it because they decided they wanted to try it with me. And then I moved in with them and was staying there for a while, and we got into it a lot because it got to the point of where we ended up spending about $300, if that, maybe more, at a time on this drug, and it got really, really bad. That is kind of what happened. So yeah, that's kind of where the drug abuse got a lot worse, and I didn't slow down like I thought I was going to do. I just kept increasing the usage all the time. So yeah, that's kind of where this part of the story is at. And yeah, I don't have any excuses for myself. I got into it, I chose to do it, and I chose to go harder and harder. So yeah, as I said, I'm not condoning anybody to get into drugs and do it. Like I said, I'd rather people just avoid all the drugs, because it's not a good thing to have in your life. But so I'll stop rambling. Let's move on to the next part of the story. So this part of the story takes place when I met my son's mother. She came to live with me for maybe like 2 or 3 months, and this was before I moved in that apartment with the guy that we were spending $300 on drugs, quite casually. Yeah, we had stayed together and eventually got to the point to where she wound up pregnant, so she went to go live back with her parents, and that right there, I tried to slow down, but it didn't happen. I was kind of being selfish, I do admit that. But I was still struggling because I would have to go to work, and then when I would go to work, I would be there for 12 hours every weekend, Friday, Saturday, and sometimes Sundays. And then the other 5 days of the week in general, maybe except for one I was off, I was there for 10 hours, and she would always want me to come visit her, which when I would go to visit, it would be about an hour and a half ride just back to the city near her, and then it would be maybe about another 30-45 minutes of a ride to go see her, and then I'd be over at her house for like 6 hours, and then I would have to leave, go all the way back to my house. I'd get like maybe 4 or 5 hours of sleep, have to be up and repeat this every single week. So it really took a toll on me. So the drug use didn't stop because it kept me awake. It helped me keep up with my job. And after, or around the time that my son had been born, or actually at the time my son had been born, I went in debt going to see my son being born because I was not going to miss the birth of my first son. And I went to the hospital. I was there. I do admit I was in the wrong for bringing drugs with me to the hospital because I couldn't stand being sober because I was always tired, and I would get yelled at because I would fall asleep all the time because of how tired I was. So I was kind of forced to be awake by everybody around me. I was forced to perform a lot longer and harder than I had ever performed in my entire life. And take note that this was like for a whole year, 2 years, that I was forced to perform like this. And I couldn't handle it because I burned my body out as a teenager, staying up for days at a time, just being a stupid teenager playing video games and hanging out with his friends all the time. But I was there the day my son was born, and the day after he was born, this was the only time I got pictures of him. My son's mother had pretty much said that she called the cops on me or something of this, that, and the other, because me and my son's mother had got into an argument over something. I really don't remember what it was. It was a while ago. But she had said that I called the cops on you, etc., etc., and so I packed up everything I had. I had like a military bag full of stuff with me, and I just took off. I ran a mile from the hospital. I didn't know what to do. I was stuck in, like, out in the woods. I was in the sticks. But I called one of my friends, and lucky enough, he was able to help me out. He came and picked me up, and he took me back home, and ever since then, I haven't seen my son, and I'll explain a bit more on that later on down the line of how I knew I was never going to see my son again. Also, to clarify, it wasn't my son's mother, it was my son's mother's mother that had said she was calling the cops on me. So it wasn't my son's mother that had called the cops, it was her mother that did. So yeah, I do realize that I said it was my son's mother, but that wasn't the case. But let's move on. Now, I will say this is, all of this has been really, really hard to talk about, and this part is even harder because this is kind of where my life got really messed up. I mean, aside from, all the drug use that happened before, but there was a night where I went out with the buddy of mine where we were, the one we spent $300, so I'm not going to go back into that, but he took me out one night to go hang out with some of his friends, and we went to this hotel, and I had met this woman there that she was interested in me. I knew nothing about this woman. She had an interest, so it was mutual, and I do admit I was kind of in the wrong because I tried to get her to cheat on her husband, but I pretty much sat her down. I'm going to explain this fully. I sat her down outside of the hotel because I had like this nice little fireplace outside. It was really cold. It was like a nice place to chill, talk it out because we were there privately. But I sat her down and I told her straight up, I was like, you have a family. It's up to you if you want this to happen, because we were going to be sleeping in the same room that night. And I told her, I was like, it's up to you if you really want this to happen. I don't want you to, ruin the family that you have by making a stupid choice. I really don't. So I just want to know, if you really want to go through with this, we can. If not, it's your decision. I'm not going to force you to do something you don't want to do. Of course, she said no, so I took that in stride. I went about my way for the rest of the night, and then I tried to call my son's mother so I could find out how my son was doing, but she ignored my calls, she ignored my texts, and it was just that demeanor right there. I don't know what it was that exactly let me know, but I knew from that night I was never going to see my son again, and I still have not seen him to this day. I haven't even seen a single picture of him since he was born. So for the rest of that night, I went really hard on drugs and drank a lot of alcohol because I was trying to kill myself with the chemical mixture. I know a decent bit of how the chemical mixtures work, and I was trying to kill myself in my sleep with a heart attack. I didn't tell anybody this. Nobody has really known that that night I tried to kill myself in a room full of people. And yeah, it was kind of messed up. I have several other words for it, but I'm not going to do that on here. But the same night, I didn't find out till later, but I had gotten raped that same night in my sleep. I was told this later on, and I had no idea that it happened. And when that realization hit me that that happened, it was kind of messed up because it was the second time something like that happened to me, because I'm a heavy sleeper. I can sleep through bombs going off. I can sleep through extreme storms. And it hit me really hard that I had been raped a second time in my life. And this time it wasn't by a female, it was by a male. The first time in my life was a female that did it to me. This is really hard for me to talk about, but I'm talking about it because it feels good to get it off my chest, to let people know that I'm messed up in the head because of these situations. But I'm gonna stop rambling and we can move on to the next part. So yeah, all of that stacked on top of one another, I just kept going through really bad situation after bad situation, and nothing was helping. So I kept getting harder into drugs. I kept going harder and harder and harder. As I said, I was forced to overperform for people just to make everybody happy. And I myself was not happy. The only way I had happiness was a synthetic kind of happiness. It wasn't real. And I know the saying goes, if you can't make yourself happy, you can't make anybody else happy. And I wasn't following through with that. It was really hard for me to go through everything that I went through and still be standing tall like I do today, especially with making this channel and trying to let others do what I am doing right now. That's what I would like for people to do, but not trying to get sidetracked. But the way all this goes back to the very beginning of the story is, after all of that, as I said a minute ago, I just went harder and harder and didn't slow down up until the point where I started having random anxiety attacks, and I was dealing with a lot at the time. I'll talk about this another time too, but I can't see my daughter, who is older than my son, or how I can't see my daughter because of what goes on with that family. There's a lot of messed up stuff there too. I won't get into it in this video, I'll do it another time, but it's just a lot that has gone on in my life, and to do this makes me feel so much better. But yes, all of that led up to the blackout I almost had, to where I slowed down and I started getting clean off of that drug, and I struggled getting off of it. I struggled so much, but I am clean to this day. I still have like 3 more demons I've been trying to get rid of, but I am getting clean slowly, and I am getting clean faster. Alcohol and tobacco are my biggest right now. Like I said, that's one of the hardest. Those are the 2 hardest that I have been struggling with, because they're legal, they're everywhere, they're in your face, anybody can get a hold of them, and that's what led up to that point of me having bad anxiety from drug use. If you like what we do here at War, please like and subscribe, learn from our experiences, and come back for the next video. Thank you, and have a good day.